Hello and welcome to Trinity Pullman Online for the 4th of December 2022, the second Sunday in Advent. Using the narrative lectionary, we are doing something which I think holds a lot of integrity. Rather than talking about John the Baptist as often the Revised Common Lectionary does, John the Baptist and Jesus were born at the same time. So to talk about John the Baptist prior to the birth of Jesus has always created a little bit of dissonance for people. Like, they think that John the Baptist is saying, when he's saying prepare the way of the Lord, they're thinking about preparing the way for the baby. But it doesn't work that way if John the Baptist and Jesus were born like 2 months apart. So what the narrative lectionary does is they move into the time right before Jesus, the time of the prophets, and then today, a time in the later prophetic period, in fact, just about 300 years before Jesus. And so we are going into the book of Esther. Esther chapter 4. When Mordecai learned what had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and he went through the city wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. Then Esther called Harach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go out to Mordecai to learn what had happened and why. Harach went to Mordecai in the open square in the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and charge her to go to the king to make supplication to him, and entreat him for her people. Harach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said, and then Esther spoke to Harach and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any person, man or woman, goes to the king inside the inner court without being called first, there is only one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come in to the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than any of the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your family might perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go and gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my maids will also fast as you do. And after that I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, then I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. It'd be easy as you're hearing this story to be completely lost, because first of all, a lot of us have not necessarily read the story of Esther or heard of it. We may have heard of Esther, but really, the actual plot is foreign to us. And so let's fill in a little bit of the background so you have some kind of an idea. We deal, when we're dealing with Israel and the history of Israel, with a lot of talk of different empires. We deal with Egypt. We know about Egypt. We deal with Assyria, which is now Syria, in the north, and it becomes a great empire. We deal with Babylon, which becomes Babylonia, which is Iran. And so these places we are fairly familiar with. After Assyria fell to Babylon, then Babylon fell, as all empires will, to the Persians, and that's where we are now. So the Persian Empire, coming in from just a little bit further to the east, has come in under Darius and swept away the Babylonian Empire and taken control of the whole of what we would now know as the Middle East. In fact, they pushed all the way up into and tried to take over Greece too. And that's where you get the whole battle between the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae as Persia is trying to push in. They get pushed back and then kind of hold their peace, at least for a while. So Esther, a Jewish woman, is living in Susa, the capital city of Persia. One of the things that it tells us is that after the Babylonian exile that we all hear about, we all have this image of all of the Babylonian people, all of the Jewish people in Babylon rushing back to Israel and singing and dancing and rebuilding the temple. But the reality is that only about 10% of the people who were living in Babylon that were Jewish actually moved back. There was just like no need. And people were able to be Jewish and live in Babylon, and eventually part of the whole diaspora moved into other cities as well. Here is Esther living in the city of Susa, a city with a large Jewish population. Her uncle, this man by the name of Mordecai, is her uncle. And so that kind of gives you the family relationships that exist. So the story basically follows this woman, Esther, and it shows that, God will often work in ways that are not directly holy, or, it's not this moment where the clouds part and the sun beams down and you have this overwhelming, awe-inspiring God moment. This book is actually, interestingly, in most Jewish quarters classified as heretical. And even though it's incredibly popular and it's read in Jewish people's homes, considered heretical by rabbis and scholars. Why heretical? Well, the rabbis had to come up with kind of a quick answer on that one, and so they said, well, God is very seldom, if ever, mentioned in this book, and so therefore it's heretical. The reality most scholars will look at, and even Jewish scholars now will kind of laugh and say, yeah, the reality is that the real smart people in this story and the real people that kind of get things done are the women, and that's why they're going to declare it heretical, because they don't want any women getting any ideas that they can kind of take charge and that they can become the heroes of the story. So let's declare this book heretical so that nobody gets a hold of it and gets any ideas. Kind of like, back in Imperial Russia when Anna Karenina was written, and a lot of the aristocratic husbands forbade their wives from being able to read it, and the Orthodox Church declared it to be heretical. Well, once again, it was probably so these wives wouldn't get any ideas. The point of the book is to be ready, to be open to possibilities. The story kind of flows along in an interesting way. The king has many wives, but he has one wife that's always his favorite. And there is a big drunken kind of stag party that's going on in the palace, and the king, the Persian king, emperor, is bragging to all of his compatriots about how beautiful his wife Vashti is. And as the party continues and as they get drunker and drunker, he starts to brag more and more until finally he decides to call for Vashti so he can have her parade in front of his friends and show off as to how beautiful his wife is. Well, Vashti is a lot smarter than all that. She knows that the last thing that she's going to do is go into this big banqueting hall with a bunch of drunk guys. And so she absolutely and completely refuses, which, infuriates the king because, I have been insulted I've been told by my wife, no, heaven forbid. And so he banishes Vashti, which then creates a problem. Now he doesn't have a favorite wife any longer. And so what do? Well, if you're the Persian king, the thing that you do is you have this great big empire-wide beauty contest. And that's what happens in the book of Esther. And so the most beautiful women from all across the Persian Empire are brought together, and for a year they are given the most ultimate spa treatment that could possibly exist. They're bathed in donkey's milk or whatever was considered to be, de rigueur at that time. And then they're all paraded before Xerxes. And then Esther wins. Lucky girl, you might think to yourself. Wow, she wins the crown. She gets to go and live in the palace. She gets to be the queen. But it's really not all that great. She does get to be the queen, but the palace is a dangerous place to be. And she gets caught up in a palace intrigue with the Persian Secretary of State, a man by the name of Haman, who has plotted because he has been insulted by her uncle Mordecai. The only way that Haman thinks that he can get Mordecai to be killed is to just wipe out all of the Jewish people that live there. And so he kind of creates this plot, kind of like back with Daniel in the lion's den, that sort of a plot to get all of the Jewish people exterminated. Well, Esther and Mordecai work on a solution, a very kind of devious and clever solution to the problem, and are able finally to turn the table on this nasty old Simon Legree kind of character by the name of Haman. And Esther becomes the hero of the story. Take a little while to read the story this evening. It's really quite interesting. It's a good little novel, and it's a hoot. But one of the lines within the story that we hear today is a line that I think that we can understand, because in most of our lives, we go through life, and while God may be very present, we're not necessarily people who have those like saint moments where, the sky opens up and the angels are singing and we get this we just kind of go from day to day, and we are aware that God is with us, that God is present, but nothing really out of the ordinary or wild or mystical tends to happen to us. Maybe once in a while, but one day is pretty much like the other. And in the midst of this kind of ordinary path of life, Esther gets to go to the palace and become queen, but even so, she's probably wondering to herself, what in the world is this all about? And why am I here? And what's the purpose in all this? And Mordecai, her uncle, has this wonderful line where he says, who knows, but that for this moment you were put in this place. Who knows, but that for this moment you were put in this place. Good words to think about, because in your day-to-day life, whether you're a business leader, whether you're in academia, if you're teaching child development or physics or English, or if you're working at Schweitzer, or if you're cutting hair, whatever it is that you find yourself doing, are you open? Are you open to the simple and everyday word that might come to you? And you might think to yourself, well, what moment? What's going to happen? When's it going to happen so that I can prepare for it? And the response back is more like, who knows? Who knows what that moment might be? And actually, that moment may happen over and over again. But are you open for that? And can you respond? Not because you've prepared for it, but can you respond simply with the gifts that you already have. That's the way Esther was able to work. You know, she didn't do anything extraordinary, but she took what was kind of on her plate, and then she kind of worked with that and was able to ultimately save her people, to respond just by being open to the need and to the possibility. Maybe you are here. Maybe you are here, wherever you find yourself, in that place, you, for just such a moment. But you have to keep your eyes and your heart open to those moments. Amen. Amen.